Now, I campaigned for President Obama. I went to Florida, and the Jews, they always vote Democratic. I mean, they're nuts. They never think about themselves. They're always taken for granted. I'm a Democrat. I'm a good Democrat. Take my word for it. I believe the Democratic Party is the better of the two parties, because I believe our basic philosophy is to say, you need a helping hand, we will help you. And that the Republican Party's position has been, I'm not talking about Bob Turner, I'm talking about the party, has been, I made it on my own, you're going to have to make it on your own. And I prefer the Democratic Party philosophy of a helping hand. But I'm not someone you can take for granted. And when George W. Bush ran, and Kerry was the Democratic candidate, and Kerry didn't understand the danger of terrorism, thought more that it's sort of like a criminal action. It goes away, you send a cop. That's not what terrorism is about. We're going to be in a war with terrorism for another 50 years. And the question is, do we have the resolve to fight the terror? Or will we ultimately give in with some peace treaty? I don't trust the French. I don't trust the English. The fact is, anti-Semitism is rising both in France and in Great Britain. And they're not friends of the state of Israel. They pretend to be, but they're not. The real ally, historically, the state of Israel, beginning with Harry Truman and every president thereafter, particularly Reagan and Bush, particularly supportive of the state of Israel. And when I saw the race between Bush and Kerry, I said, there's no question in my mind that Bush is better on the issue of terrorism. They called me up and they said, would you support us? And I said, I don't agree with President Bush on a single issue other than on the issue of terrorism. Not one! But on that issue which subsumes all others, more important than all others, because if they defeat us on the issue of terrorism, what good is anything else? And I said, if you understand that, yeah, sure, I'll be supportive of President Bush and announce it publicly. And I did just that way. Just that way. And they sent me, they always send me to Florida to talk to your cousins. And I did. And I was happy to campaign for him. And then when we had the next election with President Obama and McCain's certainly a decent man, I decided, based on my conversation with President Obama, that he understood terrorism and he understood the need for a secure state of Israel. And I said, I'll support you, said I to him. And he said to me, will you go to Florida? So I said, sure, I'll go to Florida. And I went to Florida, and I spoke on his behalf. And I like him. He's a very personable guy. But his philosophy since that time is different than that which I had hoped. It's the narrative. Let me explain to you what I mean by the narrative. There's so many people who think, oh yes, you know, Israel is the gift of the Western world to the Jewish people exchange for the horror of the Holocaust. That's not true at all. Israel is the land of the Jewish people. They've been there 3,000 years. They've been there since Abraham, Moses, who just got to the border, King David, King Solomon, and Jesus. Jesus was a Jew, and so were his 12 apostles. The Jews lived in Israel, that land, for 3,000 years. Now, I accept the fact that the Arabs live there now, and that there has to be a two-state solution. And I've been for the two-state solution. But what I objected to, and said so strongly when President Obama says, first he humbled, sought to humble the Prime Minister, and I was out, Netanyahu, and I was outraged by that. And he was clearly hostile in his comments with respect to the state of Israel, and I was outraged by that. Now, every prime minister that I know of in the modern era has accepted the two-state solution, including Bibi Netanyahu. It's a fact. And the question is, how do you work it out? And how do you make sure that when you have an Arab state next to a Jewish state, that they're not going to use that state to gang up on Israel, as they have in 5 different wars? Imagine if Israel, God forbid, had lost a single war. You know what they would be doing? They'd be doing to Israel what they're doing to their own people in Syria. Killing them on the streets, men, women, and children. If they'll kill their own people, what do you think they would do to the Jews? So Israel can never, ever lose a single war, because then it's over. And so when the president says to Israel, you're going to have to sit down, and you're going to have to go back to the pre-67 lines. That's not an adequate statement on his part, because everybody recognizes that the pre-67 lines are not defensible borders. And everybody in America, whenever they've talked about Israel and its needs, they talk about defensible borders. Pre-67 lines, the West Bank is only 9 miles from the Mediterranean, right in the middle of the state of Israel. That's not a defensible border. So, what should the president have said? The president should have said, now that Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, is part of the Palestinian organization, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, before Israel sits down with them, has to renounce terrorism. You can't ask Israel to sit down and negotiate with a terrorist organization. Hamas says in its charter, it says every Jew who entered historic mandated Palestine after 1917 must be expelled. That's in the charter. Hamas says Tel Aviv belongs to us. Tel Aviv belongs to us, they say. It's not Jerusalem, it's Tel Aviv. So I'm saying that what President Obama should have said before the Jews in Israel have to sit down with the Palestinians. Hamas now is the senior partner there, the president of the Palestinian Authority. Abbas is an elderly man. I'm an elderly man. But he has said he's tired. I'm not tired. He has said he's going to retire. And they are corrupt, the Fatah. so that Hamas, which is terrorist, is not corrupt, and therefore it will have the people. So therefore, what he should have said is, before you want to negotiate, and I ask the Israeli to negotiate, you have to renounce the use of terrorism. You have to say, we accept the legitimacy and the existence of the State of Israel. And you have to say that when we arrive at a final settlement with the lines, we will recognize Israel as a Jewish state. That's what they have to say. And he didn't say it. All he did was to put conditions on Israel, no conditions on the Arabs, on the Muslims, on the terrorists, in this case, Hamas, the organization. And that's why I'm upset. That's why I am upset and why I want to send them a message. Now, you can send the message. And you do it by sending him, Bob Turner, to Congress. And it'll be an explosion. It will be like they had in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, they had a situation where they had, that's the bluest state in the Union. That blue means the most democratic state, Massachusetts. And they had the bluest seat in the Union. That's the Kennedy seat for the state Senate. That seat was taken by Scott Brown. It sent a bolt of lightning. I want to tell you, it made Obama much more moderate. From my vantage point, too moderate. He gave away everything. I don't think that rich people should. And this is not his position; it's my position. I don't think rich people should not pay reasonable taxes. I think it's crazy, absolutely crazy, that millionaires get tax breaks. And it's crazy when you have somebody like Warren Buffett, who's a multi-billionaire, a very decent man, and he says, my tax rate is 17.4%. 17, I pay 35%. His secretary probably pays close to that, if not that. And he pays 17.4. And you know why? Because that tax code allows people who draw their income from the stock market to pay 15%. It's nuts! It's absolutely crazy. And the Democrats and the Republicans are responsible for it. I don't assess this only against Republicans. Democrats were in charge when much of this was done. These tax loopholes, these special provisions for the ultra-rich. And it's got to change. And you can make the change. And that is what's so wonderful. That at election time, people respond. And the people in Congress are scared to death. I mean, as low as President Obama is in the ratings, the members of Congress are even lower. They're lower than, and I hate to say it, than dog catchers, because there's nothing wrong with being a dog catcher, right? But they're lower than dog catchers.
Oh, Obama?
No. Congress. The members of Congress, in terms of the way people perceive them. So, now let me conclude.